Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down the ending of Blue Beetle.
Yeah! Nice choice.
The new DC movie is now out, and throughout this video we're going to be going through what happens at the end and what's going on with the DCU in general. It's all a bit of a mess, and there's lots of things kind of up in the air at the moment with a quote-unquote reboot headed up by James Gunn. Firstly though, I want to touch on those post-credit scenes, what they could mean for the future, and yeah, everything that I think could be happening with the Blue Beetle. We're going through it all, but obviously heavy spoilers ahead, so if you don't want anything ruined, then I'll recommend you turn off now. With out of the way, huge thank you for clicking the video. Now let's get into Blue Beetle.
What the?
Host acquired.
Who said that? It's okay, it's gonna be okay! Space.
Okay, so the film follows Jaime Reyes and his family as he finds himself in possession of an ancient alien relic known as the Scarab. Bonding to Jaime, it begins a symbiotic relationship with him that grants him an exoskeleton with incredible powers. Taking on Carapax's indestructible man and his boss Victoria Cord, Jaime learns to get to grips with his new abilities and he becomes a hero for Palmera City. Now this is a fictional place from the comics, and originally the character was from El Paso. However, the comic company wanted to give him a place to call his own, which is of course in the same vein as cities like Gotham and Metropolis. Bit of trivia for you, but Palmera City was actually created for the movie, but it appeared first in the comics due to them being able to pump them out quicker. Home of Cord Industries, this is a big location that most of the movie centers around, with it sort of being like how the Oscorp building kept popping up in Amazing Spider-Man. It's here where Jaime gets the Scarab from, and this is given to him by Jenny Cord. And we actually visit the mansion that she grew up in at one point in the film, and it's here that we get a tease towards her father Ted Cord. Ted is a big character from the comics, and he was the second version of the Blue Beetle. Now if you recognise the guy in the painting, this is because Jason Sudeikis has actually been cast in the role. Though he doesn't appear in the movie per se, we do get some lines of dialogue that he spouts off which take us in the mid-credit scene. After taking over Cord Industries due to Carapax self-destructing himself and Victoria, we see as Jenny says that she's going back to her old home. Jaime offers her a lift, and from here we cut into that mid-credit scene. Now during this, a broadcast is played out, and we get Ted Cord in a sort of almost Zod-like hologram message thing saying that he's alive. We then focus on the classic Blue Beetle suit, and it lets us know that should they make a sequel, then he's gonna be coming back. Thought to be dead throughout the movie, this teases that the character will return, and if Gunn decides to make a follow-up, then that's the way things are gonna go. I'm kind of in a weird place with DC post-credit scenes at the moment, and I actually looked back at all their past movies and realised how pointless that most of their ending teasers were. Justice League teased the Legion of Doom and Deathstroke, which is never going to happen. Snyder's way better version teased that as well, and also the Nightmare Timeline, which doubt that's going down now. Both Shazams teased Mr. Mind, Black Adam had Henry Cavill, Flash ended up showing us George Clooney, and I'm sure there's another one that I can't remember. Does Wonder Woman 1984 count? We'll have to see, but either way, that's at least 6 teasers to things that have been mothballed, and due to the opening weekend predictions for this, I doubt it's going to set the world on fire either. I went to my local cinema and they had absolutely no showings there, and then had to travel to the next cinema over in North Shields. That was doing 4 for the whole day, opening day, and you compare this to movies like Mission Impossible, which had showings every hour in multiple formats, and it doesn't feel like the studio's got that much confidence in it. Unfortunately, I think DC saw what happened with the box office of their last films and just kind of dumped it out here, but Gunn has still remained adamant that Reyes will remain in his movie. So if Ted Cord does come across, then you probably want to know everything about him, and if I'll admit I've been a bit of a negative Nancy, so for the next part of the video, we'll just focus on who that character is. Now the original Blue Beetle was named Dan Garrett, and like a lot of superheroes, tragedy struck his life from a young age. His father was a police officer who was killed by a criminal, and this made him vow to become a crime fighter. This was all shown in the Mystery Men comics of 1939, which were then later reprinted as part of the Blue Beetle Annual. That was by Charlton Comics, and technically they didn't own the full rights to the character, they just purchased the printing plates which gave them somewhat the ability to put the character out there. Now during 1964, Charlton, they just said fuck it, and decided to create a new Blue Beetle with them just adding an extra T to Dan Garrett's surname. They scrapped his powers and also his origin story and came up with a new one in which he was an archaeologist. This is somewhat riffed upon in the opening of the movie, with us getting newspaper clippings that show Ted Kord funded his research. That's in the Scientific Review, which has an atom symbol on it, and we also get one from the Daily Planet. We find out Garrett found a mystical scarab in Egypt, and just like the comics, it bonded with him before moving on to Jaime. Now where Ted Kord comes into it is that Charlton decided to get rid of Garrett in 1966, and they then replaced him with Ted Kord. Kord was a former student of Garrett, and he was actually at his side when Garrett died. Perishing in battle, Garrett went to pass the scarab on to him, but it was unable to be transferred over. Now, Charlton eventually ended up getting bought by DC, and with him came a lot of characters like the Question and Captain Atom. Alan Moore actually originally wanted to use these as part of a series he was working on, but DC shut that idea down because of what he was planning to do with them. In the end, he still continued ahead with his story, but he made somewhat plays on their characters which would go on to become Watchmen. As for Kord, he's a genius-level inventor who has all manner of gadgets and gizmos at his disposal. Moore brought all these over for Night Owl and Watchmen, and even Archie is based on Kord's ship the Bug. After Garrett's death, Ted took the scarab with him, but he didn't really use it. It appeared in both Crisis on Infinite Earths and the death of Superman, but it only ever really reacted when it was attacked. I can kind of see in the films that it'll become a sort of mentor to Jaime, and potentially the pair together could study the scarab and see how it works. That's kind of how the comics went too, with the scarab skipping from Dan to Jaime and granting both with its incredible abilities. I think the next movie will likely center on them searching for Ted, which is when they'll use his intelligence to truly get the backstory of its origins. Kinda what I think they're doing with the Ten Rings in Shang-Chi, and we may learn more about the alien origin and where things could be going in the future. Now, the post-credit scene of the movie is more sort of an in-joke for the film, with us getting a clip of a claymation version of El Chapo in Colorado. This was a Mexican superhero comedy that aired in the 70s, and it's also what Jaime's uncle named his machine after, which has the red and yellow from the character's costume on it. Now, this is more just kind of giving a little nod towards Latino culture, and it pops about one point in the movie with Rudy's machine playing it over the security footage. We can catch scientists and security guards watching it, one of which is played by Felipe Esperanza, and this is just kind of bringing things full circle from that and ending the movie with a little joke. Now, as for the future of the DCU, I think that unfortunately Gunn's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with it. That's not a Rock Black Adam joke, by the way. Now, he was, of course, brought on in a time where a lot of movies still had to be released, and thus he has to go out and promote these like they're part of his universe. However, it is kind of becoming clear that the audience interest just isn't really there with this stuff, and judging by his slate announcement, I think it's going to be a while before we see these characters again. The last 7 DC films connected to this universe have all flopped, and due to the low predictions of Blue Beetle, I unfortunately feel like it's going to be the case here too. Kinda makes you wonder what's going on at the company, because I don't know how many flops in a row it can take for them to realize, like, maybe we should just hard reboot it. Back in the day, if a film did badly, it just didn't get a sequel, but now studios are so tied to their shared universes that they refuse to let go. If Aquaman 2 bombs, then that's gonna be 9 flops in a row, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. You'd think third movie in they'd start to realize it, but Gunn's made it clear he's still going ahead with bringing elements of these other movies across that he thinks works. We of course recently had Gal Gadot discussing how they were putting things in place for Wonder Woman 3, and Margot Robbie's been announced as remaining as Harley Quinn. We of course have Peacemaker, Waller, and some of the other characters continuing, but there's some new faces too in the form of Batman and Superman. I kind of feel like they should have just called it a recast instead of a reboot, because it doesn't really seem like much is changing when you get down to the brass tacks of it. Henry and Ben are both out, but to be honest, it seemed a couple of years ago that was the case anyway. Both came back for Black Adam in The Flash, with Ben also getting a scene in Aquaman 2 that we now know has been cut. Still though, there's been talks for years of them being out, so I think they could have just had Gunn take over without ever announcing a reboot. Now, the biggest criticism with Warner Brothers' handling of DC has always been the mismanagement behind it. Unfortunately, when characters are announced as being in one week and out the next, it doesn't seem like things are even going that smoothly now. Though they're making a lot of noise about how these characters are staying in the universe, I think behind the scenes there will probably be a lot of panic because of how much money these movies are losing. It's been reported that this year, Warner Bros. Has lost $1 billion on the 3 movies they've released in the DCU, and they must be wondering whether to salvage it or scrap it. There was once a time when you just had to say something was a superhero movie and people would pile in to see it, but now, on the whole this year, most of them have done worse than other franchises, except for Indiana Jones. Now it makes you wonder if the interest for a shared comic book universe will even be there by the time we hit Superman Legacy, and I can imagine behind the scenes that everyone's kind of a bit worried. Looking at Joker and the Batman, both did big numbers, and they're the two DC movies released since the shared universe began that aren't connected to it. This was the company that started doing crazy stuff because Man of Steel and Batman v Superman didn't hit the numbers they were after, but I think if they got those films box offices today, they'd actually be over the moon. Now, I know I'm probably coming across as super negative on this, but I'm just trying to be realistic and think about how this is shaping the industry. I actually think that the poor performance of comic book movies in general will put studios off investing so much into them going forward, as they're no longer the golden goose that they once were. Now, for argument's sake, let's say Gunn and the studio say f*** it, this is the plan, and we're keeping these characters around. I actually think they might be incorporated into more creative ways, rather than just getting their own solo movies. The team-ups to me are the ways to go, and with us knowing what's coming in Gunn's slate, I actually think that'll be the way that they're going to be handled. Gunn said there are still some movies that haven't been announced yet, and I think this will probably be a Justice League or JSA film. The latter was one of the best parts of Black Adam, and with Waller being behind them, that could be something that's brought forward into this brand new universe. Or, well, not really brand new, but you know what I'm saying. Garrett was in the Golden Age JSA team, and Blue Beetle's been part of the JLA, JLI, Young Justice, and Teen Titans as well. I think they will probably just combine it into either a Young Justice or JSA thing, and I think team-ups are the way to take the movies that maybe don't break the bank at the box office. They can combine the members, so you've got someone, say, really popular like Batman with the slightly lesser known ones that are used in more of these lower performing movies. Now they could all boost each other up in these team-up movies, and it would help to build up their names. Now that's not saying Blue Beetle isn't popular, because I know he's got a big fan base, but yeah, just with this being his first movie, it might be the way they do it. I think the JSA will actually play a big part in Gunn's plans too, as they were brought up again at the end of Shazam 2. That was in a post-credit scene that James Gunn approved, and we know that he's been nixing others so they don't promise certain things. For example, Henry Cavill, Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle were supposed to be at the end of The Flash, but they ended up reshooting this to include George Clooney. So leaving this in shows how he probably hoped that in some ways it could be brought up again in the future, and we might get these characters teaming up rather than purely solo stories. I think that's probably the smarter way to go, as they might not be selling many tickets on their own, but as one united group they could still push things a lot more. As for the film as a whole, I think that it's definitely one of the stronger ones of these DCU films that's been released the last couple of years. The entire family angle works really well, and even if I don't think the movie hits the mark on everything, it still has a lot of things in it that deserve to be brought across to future movies. There are moments where you can tell this was originally shot for HBO Max, and with a bigger budget and push involving these characters, in the future I think it could do even better. Xolo Maridueña does a great job as Blue Beetle, and it's nice seeing him getting the spotlight after killing it in Cobra Kai for years. The family are great too, and I think they add another dimension to the film that often isn't shown in superhero movies. Unfortunately, this kind of leads into the cliches of stuff like, your family's what makes you weak, and so on, and you can probably tell beat for beat exactly how this movie's gonna go. I think the main issue the movie has is that it feels derivative of a lot of other films that have come before and probably done it better. There's lots of things in the film where they clearly looked at Spider-Man and the MCU as a whole and thought, how can we redo this with the Blue Beetle era instead? This is very much what I'd call a Phase 1 movie, and it comes with both the positives and negatives that had. There's some humour that works and sometimes doesn't, and also some underdeveloped villains that don't quite live up to their potential. There was a time in the MCU where the bad guys basically just ended up becoming the heroes in a different coloured costume, and this is something that happens here too. Now, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives here, and there's definitely a lot to like. Bruna Marquezine is brilliant as Jenny Cord, and this is a film with a really strong supporting cast that has happened to push it to a level that it might not have reached without them. There's also Carapax the Indestructible Man as well too, who in the comics was an archaeologist, which ties into the whole Dan Garrett thing. They kinda make him a sort of Kraven the Hunter / Ironmonger figure here, and it's an update that brings a pretty obscure character to the forefront in an exciting way. At the end, the backstory really makes you feel for him, and I kind of feel like could have dropped that earlier in the movie to make you more attached to the character. Susan Sarandon is just sort of like we are using technology to create weapons kind of things, and though they have her do some really evil over-the-top stuff to make her look evil, it's just kind of the racist evil CEO stereotype. Again, all the family stuff works really well though, especially with the emotional beats that happen with Jaime's dad and trying to save his home. Stuff like this, that's what makes it stand out, and I think they could have leaned into elements like this a lot more, as unfortunately at the moment it just feels like another comic book movie instead of being a must-see one. That third act just falls into the same cliches that have dogged comic book movies for the last couple of years, and it's an uninteresting CGI fight that makes the movie become mundane when it had so much potential. Even lines like, "You should have killed me when you had the chance," "I need to find my purpose," "Maybe this found you for a reason," just kind of make the movie feel like stuff you've seen before, which is what often holds back new heroes due to creating instant comparisons instead of allowing it to feel fresh. Now, it unfortunately got released during a very weird time in the DC movie slate because there's just a massive confusion surrounding the entire thing. It's supposed to be standalone, but it may be part of the DCEU, which is something Warner Brothers have decided to get rid of. It's also potentially part of a rebooted universe, and someone who may or not be the first DCU hero. Everything's just kind of in a state of flux surrounding it, but judging it on its own merits, yep, I think it was good. Also, an ignorant secretary calls him Jamie Reyes at one point, because everyone calls him Jamie when they first read his name. They also have a big belly burger box too. Jaime graduated from Gotham Law, Supes in the Flash are mentioned, and yeah, lots of nods to the comics that I just couldn't find other places to slot them in the video. Now, I think it was a risky move taking this from Max to the big screen, but I do think it deserves the push, as there are things general audiences will enjoy. Those not burned out on comic book movies will probably like this a lot, but I doubt it's going to change anyone's mind who's starting to feel the genre is becoming a bit tired. As Rudy says in the film, Blue Beetle's like Batman, just not as good, and yeah, kind of feel that's a good summary of where the film stands in the DC pantheon of movies. In the end, Blue Beetle was a solid movie that I think is definitely worth checking out, and because of that I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I feel it's probably the best way they could have introduced the character, but unfortunately it comes at a weird time where superhero movies feel like they're in a strange place. Had it been released a couple of years back, I think it would have had way more interest, but yeah, everything going on with DC and just the genre in general probably held it back. Also, I know it's like first weekend and I've been a bit doom and gloom, but I am hoping this has legs and it just kind of, it does make its money back. It's just those opening weekend predictions, pre-ticket sales, and just the way DC movies have been performing in general, it's all kind of down at the moment, and yeah, I don't know if this is going to save it. Kind of feel like they could have just sat on this and maybe waited until Superman Legacy was out and then dropped it after, but yeah, I keep going back to something I've said numerous times where there was no need for Gunn to announce the reboot until after these movies were out. Man could have easily waited until January 2024 without anything changing, but yeah, I'm going off track, and obviously let me know your thoughts below and whether you agree with us or not. If you want to get some Heavy Spoilers merch, we've also got our t-shirt line located just below the video that will let you pick up all kinds of tops from the Heavy Spoilers history. We've got our Theory Time on there, House of the Dragon stuff, Marvel tees, and a lot more. We drop new designs on there all the time, so definitely keep an eye out for them, and huge thank you for your support. Now, if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown of the Doctor Strange leaks on screen right now that talk about a new report discussing what's coming in that film. Heavy spoilers ahead for that one, but yeah, lots of things to talk about, and hopefully I see you over there right after this. Out the way, huge thank you for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time.
See you, chump.